Sarah. I've got a lot of new material already, and I think the whole world wants new insights. It's an amazing story.
Meghan is at the bottom of the barrel.
In fact, I've seen the tapes. I've got them somewhere. God knows where now. I've got them on some.
So you've seen Nudie Rudy Meghan too?
I've seen more than one thing.
I wonder if Prince Andrew's going to come out and say, hey, Harry, I did your wife quite a few times on yachts before you got.
But I have to just say, anyone who has doubted me over the past decade about this evil woman now needs to eat some humble pie.
When Sarah Ferguson spoke this time, the room didn't react. It went completely silent, not the usual kind either. The kind where people instantly realized something serious was just said. And it all came down to one line. Meghan was Andrew's first client. From that moment, the situation escalated fast. What followed sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, caught Prince Harry off guard, and pulled Meghan Markle into one of the most talked-about rumors in recent royal history. And what made it stand out even more wasn't just the claim itself, but where it came from. This didn't come from some anonymous leak or distant critic trying to stir drama. It came from Sarah Ferguson, someone who has lived inside that system, stepped outside it, and somehow found her way back in again.
Meghan Markle was introduced by Sarah Ferguson to Prince Harry.
That alone changed how people interpreted every word. It didn't begin as some dramatic moment either. At first, it was low-key, a relaxed setting, light conversation, and that familiar Fergie grin that usually signals harmless chatter. Until one sharp reporter caught the exact sentence that shifted the tone completely. Meghan was Andrew's first client.
There is absolutely zero doubt in my mind. Rachel Meghan Markle was a semi-expensive yacht girl, and she knows it.
From that point on, things didn't build slowly. They escalated fast.
The yacht girl. Oh my God. Ghislaine Maxwell spoke. She said so. Virginia Roberts spoke. They both talked about Meghan Markle, but the world chose to ignore it. And even now, with these pictures out in the public domain, the press still refuses to expose.
Headlines began spreading across every outlet, picking up speed with each hour, while social media quickly filled the gaps with speculation.
They try to hide the files, and they fail.
Going on. And Meghan and all the things that she has done to, pull other people down and to question them and their behavior. Well, let's continue to turn the tables and talk about you, Miss Meghan Markle, and what you have done.
Within a short time, Meghan's yacht days was trending globally, pulling attention from every direction. What really caught people off guard, though, was how direct it all felt. There was no distance between the claim and the person making it. It wasn't hidden or indirect. It came straight from Fergie herself.
According to people, she got started her yachting days and she never stopped really. I don't think any of her boyfriends knew about it, but Meghan Markle was known as a hardcore yacht partying person, ready for anything.
A duchess who has been pushed out, pulled back, criticized, and analyzed more times than most figures in modern royal history, suddenly hinting at something deeper carries a different kind of weight, especially when she doesn't step in to walk it back. That's what made this moment feel less accidental and more deliberate. Reports suggest Harry was left stunned, trying to process how something like this could surface so openly. Inside the palace, the usual calm didn't last long as pressure started building while aides worked to assess what this could turn into. The royal family's long-standing strategy of controlled silence began to show cracks, not because they responded, but because they didn't. And that only made the questions louder. What did she actually mean by first client?
Being a deal or no deal girl. She was calling herself a model, and she was starring in a show Suits. She used to charge almost $30,000 per trip, which is why she was making good money. It wasn't on Suits, it was on her yachting trip.
Was it symbolic, personal, or something people would take more literally? And why bring it up now at a time when every detail connected to the royal family gets amplified across the world? This wasn't just another rumor floating around. It touched sensitive ground. Stories like this don't just create headlines, they reopen chapters the monarchy has tried to close. As conversations spread through Windsor and beyond, one idea kept coming back. Was this a mistake or a move?
In my opinion, in my analysis, and my experience of decades, this kind of analysis, for me, is the real deal. If a photo such as this of Meghan Markle with Prince Andrew years ago surfaces, that will be quite an scandal.
Because what followed didn't feel random at all. The setting itself had seemed ordinary at first, a typical royal weekend filled with charity events, polite conversations, and carefully managed appearances where everything looks effortless from the outside. But beneath that polished image, There were already signs that something was shifting. Before the public picked up on anything, quiet whispers about Fergie had already started circulating among insiders. It wasn't loud yet, but it was there, moving through private conversations and smaller circles where information tends to travel first. At first, many dismissed it. Fergie had seen decades of media storms and understood exactly how damaging a single sentence could be, which is why her behavior this time stood out even more. She didn't seem interested in holding back.
This woman knows that she's in trouble with Fergie because she knows where Meghan Markle's bodies are buried. She knows that Meghan Markle has been yachting. In fact, they had friction because Meghan had originally set her sights on Prince Andrew, but she lucked out with the idiot Harry. Not in a million years did Meghan think that she was going to score Prince Harry. She thought she was going to score Andrew until Fergie put a stop to it.
During a private event in Mayfair, surrounded by established elites and observant journalists, she reportedly made another comment that shifted the energy in the room almost instantly. With that familiar, knowing smile, she said, "People forget. Meghan's first royal connection wasn't Harry." The reaction wasn't dramatic. It was stillness. The kind where people pause, glance at each other, and try to decide whether they just heard something serious or something they weren't supposed to hear at all. Someone laughed briefly, almost out of reflex, but the lack of response around them made it clear this wasn't being taken lightly. And once those words left the room, they didn't stay contained. They moved quickly through messages, private chats, and media circles, picking up attention with every step. Within hours, conversations were already forming across different layers of the royal media ecosystem. That's when the phrase returned, stronger and more direct. Andrew's first client. It began appearing everywhere, from closed group chats to early newsroom drafts before spilling out onto social media where the pace became impossible to control.
You have to question that and you have to address it, and it has to be something that we continue to talk about because there is something there that we need to find the missing pieces to, because I believe a lot of it was scrubbed off of the internet way before we even knew who Meghan Markle was.
With each repetition, the tone shifted slightly from curiosity to something closer to concern. According to one insider, Harry struggled to accept it. Not because rumors were unusual, but because of where this one came from. It wasn't external speculation. It was tied to someone who had direct knowledge of Andrew's world. That single detail changed how seriously it was taken. What could have been dismissed as background noise quickly turned into something far more complicated, a credibility issue that demanded real attention. By midnight, royal correspondents were already piecing together timelines, looking closely at Meghan's early career and comparing it to high-profile social environments connected to Andrew's circles, many of which had faced scrutiny in the past. Meanwhile, the palace held its usual position, controlled, measured, and outwardly calm. Carefully worded no-comment responses began circulating, while behind the scenes, the pressure kept building as reporters pushed harder for clarity and direction.
The key line there, and the line that really, really interested me, was not a question about whether she was a yacht girl, but just simply stating as a fact and then asking, was it double figures or triple in terms of how many yachts she was a guest on before she met Prince Harry?
At that point, it was no longer just about the statement itself. It was about what it suggested and how far that suggestion could actually go. Behind those ornate palace doors, one question started to grow louder, even if no one wanted to say it outright. Was Fergie revealing something or shaping something? If this was intentional, then it wasn't just a remark. It was a shift in the narrative, and a dangerous one at that. Long before royal titles and global attention, Meghan Markle was operating in a completely different environment, one defined by ambition, calculated decisions, and constant adaptation. Hollywood doesn't reward passivity, and she understood early on that visibility had to be built, not waited for. From smaller acting roles to public appearances and networking events, she developed her image step by step, balancing approachability with clear strategy. She projected confidence, but underneath that was a sharp awareness of how to move within competitive spaces and make herself visible in the right moments. People who encountered her during those early years often point to the same thing: precision. She had the ability to walk into a room, identify the right connections, and leave an impression that carried forward well beyond the moment. She didn't stay confined to one circle either. Instead, she moved across different environments, interacting with industry figures, public personalities, and individuals connected to influential networks, which allowed her to expand her reach without being tied to a single identity.
Was a yacht girl. That's right. It's mentioned in the book. Meghan used to entertain as a yacht girl. Now, I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it happened, but I am saying Harry knows it.
Flown all over the world. The Suits cast members didn't understand where she got the money to fly business class all over the world.
Some of those environments included exclusive yacht gatherings, private, high-level events where influential guests interacted away from public attention. While often exaggerated in public narratives, they were still spaces where relationships, opportunities, and expectations could intersect in ways that weren't always visible from the outside. There have been claims linking Meghan to a small number of these events during her early career. Nothing has ever been fully confirmed, only fragments, mentions, and resurfaced images that later gained attention as the narrative evolved. And that uncertainty is exactly what gives a story like this its momentum. When details remain unclear, interpretation takes over. And that's where speculation grows strongest, filling in the gaps faster than facts ever could. That's precisely why Fergie's words carried so much impact. They didn't prove anything directly, but they connected existing rumors to a figure already surrounded by controversy, which made the implication far more powerful than any direct claim. Not definitive, but strong enough to shift perception. And once perception starts moving in that direction, it rarely slows down. There have been claims that Meghan appeared at some of these high-profile events while building her public image, but nothing has ever been fully verified. What exists instead is a trail of scattered reports, unnamed sources, and older photos that resurfaced years later, each adding just enough intrigue to keep the conversation alive without ever fully confirming anything.
My opinion, in my analysis and my experience of decades, this kind of analysis for me is the real deal. If a photo such as this of Meghan Markle with Prince Andrew years ago surfaces, that will be quite an scandal.
Also knows Meghan was on Jeffrey Epstein's yacht with Prince Andrew.
That's exactly where the power of this story comes from, because unclear details don't disappear. They expand, and that mix of half answers and lingering questions gave Fergie's comment far more weight than it would have carried on its own, especially once people began linking those so-called yacht days to Prince Andrew's well-documented social circles. At that point, this stopped being simple gossip and turned into something much bigger. Ferguson didn't just repeat a rumor. She reframed how people look at Meghan's past in one move. Instead of a straightforward rise from Hollywood to royalty, the public was suddenly pushed to consider a more complicated timeline, one filled with connections that hadn't been seriously examined before. For tabloids, this wasn't just interesting, it was perfect material. A story built on ambition, access, and possible overlap with one of the most controversial figures in the royal family spreads quickly, and it doesn't need concrete proof to gain traction. In royal culture, perception often moves faster and hits harder than verified facts ever could.
Epstein was also Harvey Weinstein, very prominent. There were members. Meghan Markle was just one of the working girls for Soho House. Call girl, working girl, escort, whatever you want to call it. That's what she was.
And Fergie understands that dynamic better than most. To fully grasp why her words had such an impact, you have to look closely at Prince Andrew's reputation and how dramatically it has shifted over time. He was once seen as a confident and prominent royal figure, moving comfortably through elite global circles with a level of access that opened nearly every door. For years, his lifestyle reflected that position. Luxury travel, private gatherings, and exclusive events across places like the Mediterranean, where influence and wealth shaped the environment. He became closely associated with that world of visibility and privilege, surrounded by people who reinforced that image.
And I know what you're going to say. Maybe it was just that one trip. No, there were quite a few trips. There's actually quite a lot of pictures about them. There are 2 pictures that leaked.
But that version of him didn't last. Over time, his connections to highly scrutinized individuals and controversial networks began to reshape public opinion in a way that was impossible to ignore. Headlines kept building, criticism intensified, and his public standing took repeated hits that became harder and harder to contain. The widely discussed association with Jeffrey Epstein, along with a televised interview that drew significant backlash, only accelerated that shift, with each moment adding more pressure and gradually breaking down the image that had once seemed stable. So by the time Fergie's alleged comment started circulating, Andrew was no longer seen as just another royal. He had become a liability in the public eye, someone whose name carried risk rather than prestige. And that's exactly why this connection hit so hard. Linking Meghan, a figure already under constant public scrutiny, to Andrew wasn't a small implication. It created an immediate collision between two very different public narratives, one built on reinvention and image, the other shaped by controversy and reputational damage. Even the suggestion of a past overlap between those worlds was enough to send media outlets into overdrive because they didn't need confirmation to start building the story. Just the possibility gave them enough direction to run with it. For the royal institution, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was strategically dangerous.
It could be also happening that the royal family is saying, hey, if you put a book out about Meghan Markle and completely destroy everything and really tell the people how Meghan met Harry.
Two highly debated figures, suddenly tied together in one unfolding narrative, creates a situation that's difficult to contain, especially when public trust is already fragile and where even silence can be interpreted in multiple ways. Andrew, as expected, remained out of public view, but Fergie's words pulled attention straight back toward him, extending his already complicated reputation into Meghan's carefully managed public image. And once his name becomes part of the conversation, it rarely fades quietly. Sarah Ferguson has always attracted attention, whether through curiosity or controversy, but this moment carried a different tone, as what was meant to be a private, low-profile London gathering quickly became the starting point of something much larger. At that event, she reportedly leaned in with a relaxed, almost playful energy before delivering the line that changed everything. Let's just say Meghan was Andrew's first client. On the surface, it sounded casual, almost dismissive, but the reaction in the room suggested otherwise, as the shift was immediate, subtle, but impossible to miss. And once that line left the room, it didn't slow down. Within hours, it began moving through private conversations and media channels, gaining attention with each retelling, and by the next morning, journalists were already dissecting every part of it, looking for context, meaning, and possible connections.
She was coming to New York all the time. She was in New York when Andrew was in New York for an entire month in September 2013.
Which brings everything back to one key question. What did Fergie actually mean by client? Was it a sharp, indirect comment about calculated networking, a metaphor meant to provoke reaction, or something more literal that hinted at deeper associations tied to Andrew's past? That ambiguity didn't calm anything. It intensified it. And Fergie didn't step in to clarify. She remained in that familiar space between denial and suggestion, offering no direct explanation while maintaining that composed, slightly knowing demeanor. And when questioned, her responses, both verbal and nonverbal, left room for interpretation, which only extended the life of the story. Behind the scenes, however, the tone shifted sharply. Palace insiders were reportedly frustrated, even alarmed, as efforts began to create distance between senior royals and the growing narrative, while quiet suggestions emerged that Fergie had once again stepped outside the boundaries of what is typically controlled. But this didn't feel accidental. Ferguson has spent years navigating public attention, balancing openness with unpredictability. And she understands how narratives form, how quickly they spread, and how even small statements can trigger much larger reactions. That's why this moment stood out. It carried the feeling of intent.
The reason why these pictures are so problematic for Meghan Markle is because these pictures place her with Jeffrey Epstein.
By placing Meghan's name alongside Andrew's, she didn't just revive older conversations, she redirected them, shifting the focus and changing the tone, while silence from key figures suddenly started to carry more meaning than before. Meghan's lack of response raised new questions, while Harry's reported frustration began to align with how the public interpreted the situation. And through all of it, one thing remained consistent. The story kept growing, and still, no direct response came, and that silence only made everything feel heavier. Because what started as a single comment was now turning into something much bigger. Just as it seemed like things might calm down, a new question hit even harder. Why now? Because in royal circles, timing is never random. Every comment and every reveal tends to carry intention behind it, especially when it comes from someone like Sarah Ferguson, who understands exactly how this world works and how quickly one sentence can shift everything. To understand what might be driving this, you have to look at her history with the monarchy, a story shaped by setbacks, comebacks, and constant reinvention, where nothing has ever followed a predictable path. That unpredictability is exactly what makes her moves so difficult to ignore, especially at a moment like this. She's no stranger to controversy either. From headline scandals to financial struggles and very public attempts to rebuild her image, she has lived through every side of the spotlight, and every time the royal family seemed to push her out, she found a way back in, smiling, composed, but always thinking a few steps ahead. And that pattern matters here because it raises a much bigger question. Was this just another careless remark or something far more calculated? So why bring Meghan into this now, at this exact moment?
Andrew, have you noticed how he completely avoids looking at Meghan Markle when she's around him or when she was around him?
Some insiders believe it could be quiet revenge, a subtle way of pushing back at an institution that once kept her at a distance, only to later welcome Meghan into the spotlight. From that angle, this isn't random at all. It's personal. Others see it differently. They view it as a move for control, with Fergie stepping back into a narrative where she has often been sidelined, reminding everyone that she still knows how to command attention when she chooses to. Then there's another possibility, and this one shifts the tone even further. Fergie has always understood the media game, how quickly attention moves, and how a single line can redirect an entire conversation. Creating controlled chaos isn't new for her. It's something she has used before to stay visible when the spotlight starts drifting away.
Meghan Markle was introduced through Marcus Anderson to Sarah Ferguson.
And then comes the question that changes everything. What if this wasn't really about Meghan at all? Some believe she may have been trying to protect Andrew, shifting attention away from him by introducing a new focus at exactly the right moment. If that's true, then this wasn't accidental. It was strategic, and the timing becomes even more important. Whatever the reason, one thing is clear. Fergie understands timing better than most. She has managed to survive years of pressure not by staying silent, but by knowing exactly how much to say and when to say it, giving just enough to spark headlines while keeping the full story just out of reach. And this moment might be her boldest move yet. With a single sentence, she redirected global attention, reopened old royal wounds, and placed herself right back at the center of the conversation, whether that was the intention or not. Which leads to the real question everyone keeps coming back to: what did she expect to gain from it?
Many of you have seen this picture already. You see that there's Meghan with her Cayuna hat.
By the next morning, the effects were already impossible to ignore. As her alleged comments spread across headlines, Buckingham Palace didn't respond publicly. No statements, no briefings, just silence, but not the calm kind. This felt controlled, tense, and very deliberate. Behind palace walls, however, the reality looked very different. Advisors moved quickly between meetings while phones buzzed nonstop as teams tried to figure out how to contain a story that was already spiraling beyond control. Every part of the royal family suddenly felt exposed, and no one wanted to be the first to react and risk making it worse. Prince Harry, according to sources close to him, was furious, but also stuck in a difficult position because the rumor had already gone public.
This is Rachel Meghan Markle in 2006 at a Hamptons party where Harvey Weinstein was there. But of course, nobody was mentioning Meghan Markle because she was a nobody.
React too strongly, and it fuels the story. Stay silent, and it keeps growing. Meghan, meanwhile, reportedly stepped back from the spotlight, avoiding appearances while her team worked quietly behind the scenes, reviewing possible responses and weighing legal options as reactions online continued to build. But inside their circle, the tension went deeper than the rumor itself, and that's where things became more serious. Because this didn't come from an outsider, it came from someone within their world, someone connected to the same system. And that changed how everything was perceived. Senior royals, on the other hand, maintained distance publicly, staying neutral while closely watching how the situation unfolded. Behind the scenes, damage control was already in motion, with advisors trying to redirect attention back to official duties and safer ground. But it wasn't working. The phrase "Andrew's first client" refused to disappear, repeating across headlines and conversations like something that simply wouldn't fade, no matter how much time passed. And internally, the pressure kept building. In private, frustration began to grow. Some saw Fergie's comment as a betrayal, while others questioned whether there was more happening beneath the surface than anyone was willing to admit. But one feeling stood above everything else: fear. Fear that this situation could reopen old wounds and drag the royal family back into a crisis they believed was already behind them. Because at the end of the day, the monarchy relies on control, and this time, that control was starting to slip in a way that couldn't be easily contained.
But what we've seen recently is the wokest of the woke turn on Harry and Meghan. It's their own kind turning on.
And Meghan's silence? Instead of calming the situation, it had the opposite effect, making everything feel louder, heavier, and far more difficult to ignore. By early morning, the royal machine had fully shifted into crisis mode, with aides rushing into urgent meetings, trying to maintain the appearance of stability, while dealing with a situation that was clearly anything but under control. That long-standing royal rule, never explain, never complain, was beginning to show visible cracks under real pressure. For years, it had worked as a shield, keeping the institution composed and protected. But this time, it didn't look nearly as solid as it once did. Fergie's comments spread rapidly, reaching media outlets from every direction, and suddenly the royal family's image was under pressure again. Not just on the surface, but at a deeper level that felt much harder to contain. Inside palace offices, the response was immediate and carefully calculated. Damage control moved quickly as advisors drafted precise, no-comment statements weighing every word, while senior royals quietly debated their next move: step in and create distance, or remain silent and hope the story loses momentum. But this situation had already moved beyond simple optics, because this wasn't coming from an outsider. It came from someone within their own circle, and that shifted everything, turning this from a media issue into something far more personal. Sources say Harry was deeply unsettled, caught between confronting Fergie directly or leaving it to legal teams behind closed doors. At that point, it wasn't just about the rumor. It was about trust, and whether that trust had already been broken. Meanwhile, Meghan stayed out of sight, avoiding public appearances, and that silence only intensified the speculation. The longer it continued, the more space it created for assumptions to grow and take shape. Even palace staff began to feel the shift in atmosphere. Doors closed faster, conversations lowered the moment someone walked by, and every interaction became more controlled than usual, as everyone understood that one wrong sentence could become the next headline. At the same time, courtiers attempted to redirect attention back to royal duties and official appearances, pushing forward carefully planned events. But the public wasn't moving on, and the story had already taken on a momentum of its own. Every appearance carried tension, every photo looked polished on the surface, but beneath that surface were unanswered questions that people couldn't ignore. The royal family, for the most part, seemed to be waiting it out, hoping this would fade like previous controversies. But this time, the situation felt different. Because the pressure wasn't coming from outside critics or media speculation, it was coming from within their own extended circle. And even as things appeared to settle on the surface, one thing became increasingly clear: this situation had already shifted the narrative in a lasting way. What started as a single remark from Sarah Ferguson had grown into something far more complex, touching on loyalty, public image, and internal power dynamics within the monarchy. Meghan's silence continued to hover over everything, keeping questions alive. Harry's position appeared more uncertain, and the institution once again found its past being pulled back into the present. And maybe that's the pattern. Every time control tightens, something unexpected finds its way out. Another detail, another angle, another moment that pulls public attention right back in. Now, the question isn't just whether Fergie went too far, it's what else might still be hidden beneath the surface. Because if something like this can be said publicly, then what's still being kept private? And if this situation feels intense now, it may only be the beginning of something even deeper. Now, the question isn't just whether Fergie went too far, but what else might still be sitting beneath the surface, waiting for the wrong moment to come out. Because if something like this can be said openly, even in passing, then it raises a much bigger concern about what never gets said at all, especially inside a system that has always relied on control, timing, and carefully managed narratives. And that's what makes this situation different, because it doesn't feel contained anymore. It feels like something that slipped out at the wrong time in the wrong place, and once it was out there, it couldn't be pulled back. The kind of moment that doesn't just create headlines, but quietly shifts how everything is viewed moving forward. So now it's not just about one comment or one rumor, it's about what that moment might have exposed and whether this is just the surface of something much deeper that hasn't fully come into focus yet.